Welcome to the Legendary Leadership Summit 2019 with Cody, Dakota, Wooten.
You guys are in for a treat because you're about to have another phenomenal speaker here with you. Her name is Dr. Karen Y. Wilson Starks, and Dr. Karen is absolutely spectacular. She's a global executive leadership development consultant, and she's worked in regions including Canada, Europe, and the Middle East. She's basically been all over the world. And she has the podcast, The Voice of Leadership, and she's the host of the TV show Dr. Karen Speaks Leadership. Just so many amazing things you're doing. How are you doing today, Dr. Karen?
I'm doing just great. Very, very well. Thanks for having me on the program today.
Definitely. Thank you for being here. I'm honored, and I love always hearing from you and being here with you. And your flower looks fantastic today.
Thanks, Cody.
Definitely. So, Dr. Karen, your topic for the day, we're talking about how to be a leader who gets dynamic organizational results. And the first place I'd like to start with you, Dr. Karen, is what do you see as the essence of elite leadership?
Okay, there are maybe several different components to elite leadership, and I'm going to start with what I'll call the 3 A's. So the first A is really being able to articulate the vision that you have and to articulate the purpose. So in other words, if you're wanting your people to go someplace, you've got to paint a picture. So just imagine if you had a group of bricklayers, you don't want them just sitting there thinking, okay, we're just a bunch of bricklayers. What are you building? Maybe they're building a great cathedral. And who are they building that cathedral for? What's the purpose? So the first A is articulate the vision and purpose. Secondly, I think that these legendary leaders, elite leaders, are also very busy being the architects and sustainers of what I call organizational culture, because they're actually the ones that kind of like make a difference in terms of how do we do things around here. And so not only do they start that, they keep the ball rolling. So that's being able to architect the culture. Thirdly, you're achieving collective results together. That's really quite important. You're not doing it by yourself, because legendary leaders recognize 3 things. They're developing themselves first. You know, I have my book, Lead Yourself First. So you've got to jump in first and demonstrate you're willing to learn. Number 2, they have to recognize even though they're working on themselves, it's really not about them, because all the great results happen because all of the team members actually are doing it together. And mission is the focus. You're focused on the mission. So that's kind of like a thumbnail sketch.
Definitely. And there was so much wealth just in that little 2 minutes spurt right there, because you oh my gosh, I'm like drowning in how much was just laid in there. So within that, you've got vision. You need to have a vision of where you're going to. You've got your team who you need them to see the vision as well. They're not just the bricklayers, right? They're building something amazing for other individuals, and they need to understand that power that they have. And oh my gosh, that was truly spectacular. So what were you going to say?
Well, I'm thinking that, you know, when this is about the bricklayers, it's the difference between having inspired people and people who are uninspired. And a lot of people in organizations today are working, but they don't know why they're working. They don't know that bigger reason and purpose. And so therefore they can't bring their whole energy and their whole selves to the enterprise. And a lot of times the organizational leaders are thinking, well, we've told you, you know, how to put the bricks down and how to, you know, glue them together, so to speak. They don't understand that people need more than that in order to truly be engaged in the workplace. That's the difference.
Absolutely. And engagement is at all-time lows in the world today. It's really, really low. And leaders all over the place are having problems like, how do I actually get them to be engaged? How do I get them to want to be here? because most people are checked out when they go to work. They arrive there, they're like, I'm here, I'm going to get a paycheck because I'm here for 8 hours, and then they leave. And did anything really get done that day? A lot of times, no. And that's what the statistics are showing too, is that like 50% of the work day, people aren't doing anything. Like literally, they're not doing anything except just sitting there.
Well, I think the answer to that, Cody, really is a function of that legendary leader. Because when you're a legendary leader, you give your people a reason to come to work and to be dynamic at work. It's really the function of senior leadership to begin to create that kind of culture. So one of the things that I often talk about is what we call the success culture. And there are 3 pieces of that that are important to be dialed in. The first part is the recruitment piece. You've got to select and you've got to hire the right people for the right positions and the right jobs. They've got to have the talent that's needed for whatever it is that you're asking them to do. Secondly, as far as the success culture goes, is you really have to develop all of those individuals and in the workplace. In other words, you hire them, they're great people, but they still have to grow, they still have to learn, they still have to be developed, and so you have to invest in that. And then thirdly, you have to invest in the high performance teams, because it's my contention that the great work in organizations is done by high performance teams. And so you've got to also coach and develop those teams. When all 3 of those pieces are working very well together, then you create that success culture.
What I love about that is you defined that there's a difference between a high-performing individual and a high-performing team, because they're not the same thing. Someone can perform exceedingly high and be terrible on a team. And in reverse, right? You can have people that maybe aren't the best players per se, but they understand their role on the team and they do that extremely well within that. And because of that, that team overcomes teams that are all-stars. I've seen this time and time again, especially like in sports. I've one of my favorite sports to watch is lacrosse. And there's been a time where I've watched games where you have the all-stars versus a college team. I've seen this happen, and I've watched the college team win. Why? Because the all-stars by themselves don't necessarily make a team.
Yeah, that's a very important point that you're talking about. Let me say a couple words about maybe high-performance teams and a little bit about all-stars too. Even on what we call a high-performance team, you need high performers. You need people who are very good at what they're doing, and their task is interdependent. If they don't have an interdependent task, it's really not a team. In other words, if I can do what I'm doing, Cody, without you, then we're not a team. However, if what you're doing is necessary and what I'm doing is necessary for our collective task, then we have teamwork as a possibility. It means that whatever I'm supposed to contribute, I've got to bring my A game to it. You also have to bring your A game as well. But here's what's different. Once you dial in the team piece, we don't stay in our A game silos. We are then listening to each other. And we're also co-creating and collaborating together. We're giving each other feedback. We're communicating at a deep level, and we're leading and managing through conflict. And in that collaboration process, we're getting to what I call that third answer. It's the one that neither one of us thought of by ourselves, but because we're working together, we're going to come up with that difference that nobody else thought about. That's what teams do. They're innovating. They're coming up with something that's greater, if you will, than the sum of the parts.
Exactly. It's Napoleon Hill's mastermind principle in action. And something that I loved within what you said there is it's about interdependence. Because in our, especially in the United States, we have what I like to call the myth of independence. We kind of like hail independence as the ultimate thing to attain, right? Like you want independence from your family, independence from the system. It's about independence. And at the end of the day, I mean, independence is good. You need to be able to graduate from dependence, but you can't do everything on your own. And in order to get the highest results that are humanly possible, it's all about that interdependence. I need you just as much as you need me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really critical what you're talking about, which really kind of gets a little bit into maybe some of the big barriers that actually hinder leaders from success at work. So let me mention a couple of those. One of them is just being very self-centered. In other words, you're just thinking about what you're doing, which means it's okay for you to operate, if you will, in your silo or to do something alone, create a fiefdom out there that's not communicating well with other groups in the organizations. Some of the work that I do that's most profound is actually working with the high performance teams in the organizations and helping to build a bridge between those silos so that they're actually communicating effectively with each other, and they're actually able to delegate some work to each other as well, and to have trust as they're moving through the organization. Because nothing's worse than you've got the senior leader trying to do everything him or herself. And this is especially difficult for, let's say, an entrepreneurial smaller business that's scaling and that's growing, and you're moving from being that mom and pop, head of everything, chief cook and bottle washer, but at some point you have to bring team members on board who you trust and who you can pass the baton to so that they do what they do best, and then everyone's strengths are really engaged in the process. So one of the barriers is just doing everything yourself. I think a big other barrier that goes on is having what I call a short-term focus. You've got to be in it for the long haul. And one of the things I've seen is that when you think with a long-term perspective, you're willing to invest in your people, knowing they may need certain tools in order to prosper. They might need certain training. They might need certain experiences at work, or a kind of coaching and mentoring to help them get to the next levels of development. And so organizations who are successful, they make that investment in their people, and they're not just thinking short term. And they know it can take some time to turn around a ship that maybe has been focused on the negatives as opposed to focusing on the strengths and what are people bringing to the party that will help you build that cathedral.
Absolutely. One of the most interesting ways I've heard that said before came from Simon Sinek. And he talks, his concept he talks about is the finite game versus the infinite game, right? And which game are you trying to play? Because the finite game, there's an end, there's a winner, and there's a loser. However, on the infinite game, there is no end. There are no winners and losers. There's taking the lead and falling behind. And within business, if you play the finite game, you're going to have a finite business. There's going to be a beginning to your business, and there's going to be an end to your business. You're going to win battles, and then eventually your business is going to die and lose. However, if you want a business that far outreaches you, you have to be looking to play the infinite game, which requires things like looking outside of yourself, being able to bring on new people, just as you're saying, being able to not just focus on tomorrow, but what does the next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years look like for our business, and how are we going to get there?
Exactly. And in fact, you're bringing up something right now that I think is really important, and that is, why is it important to actually do the co-creation and the collaboration for the infinite business? The reason is because any one of us alone, we're somewhat limited in what we can create and what we can dream up and what we can think about. However, if you bring that team of very smart people together, they're really going to innovate at a level that's faster than what one person can do on their own. And they're going to come up with something that no one's thought about. And at the speed of business right now, you really need that for competitive advantage. So this working together really is a part of the infinite formula, as opposed to thinking, well, I can do everything myself, which means you're going to be very limited. You're not going to be able to do as much, and you're not going to be able to do it as fast.
Exactly. And so many people in the world are so focused on getting the perfect product, doing the perfect service, being on the perfect path. And they're solely focused on that. And when they don't allow the opportunity for more insight, for different insights, and they think this is all there is, it very quickly vanishes before them. And they get kind of trapped. They don't know where to go when there's so much opportunity out there, when you have all the different perspectives, when you bring in that mastermind principle, when you get the understanding from different people, different backgrounds, all of that fun stuff.
Well, yeah, because one of the things you're sort of highlighting is the need to continue to learn and the need to continue to grow. Because at the end of the day, what you're really creating as far as a success culture is really a learning organization. And one of the things that has really hampered some organizations in the past is that they had a cash cow, something that really worked well. Sometimes success can be one of our big hindrances. And so if you're resting on yesterday's laurels, there's coming a time when that yesterday's success is no longer relevant. For example, if you really were in the buggy business today, you have far less customers than if it was back in the 17 or 1800s. So you've always got to be innovating and growing and thinking about what are people needing today? What's next?
Exactly. And innovation is crazy fast. In the past 100 years, we've innovated more than the previous 2,000 years combined. And it's continuing to increase. And if you're not ready for that innovation, you're going to get left behind in the dust, just like the buggies.
Exactly. And some other piece of this that's so important is this. A lot of organizations will bring groups together, or they might even bring teams together. But when we talk about team development, the part that they often leave out is the high-level communication skills that it really takes to give each other some real tough feedback. Sometimes you've got to be able to say to a team member, here's what's going well, here's what's not going well. You agreed to do X, Y, and Z. However, that didn't happen at the time you said it was going to happen. And it's through that communication process, through that feedback and being held accountable that you grow and learn together. So the relationships are important, and being able to manage through conflict. And so many people are not getting those skills in the workplace.
Well, and they're not getting that, not just in the workplace, but they're not getting that anywhere. I mean, I went through the educational system, and I can tell you I didn't get conflict management as something that was taught to me. I had to figure that out on my own. And that's not fun to figure out on your own when you're in the middle of a major conflict.
That's true. It really helps to have some practice on some lower level conflicts, like maybe in the sandbox at 5 years old. It helps to start there, because by the time you get to the adult level, the conflicts have higher stakes. There's more that's at risk with those. And if you really don't have the skill, you look a little more raggedy in those adult situations, having not had a chance to practice in childhood.
Absolutely. And what seems like a small problem to many people ends up becoming a huge problem for you. And you're left sapped of all energy. You're like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing that could ever happen. And it's not the worst thing that could ever happen, but it just feels that way because you haven't prepared for it. You don't know what it takes to overcome those.
That's really a good point about feeling sapped of energy, because one of the things that happens to people when they don't know how to manage conflict is frequently they are leaving situations earlier than they otherwise would leave them because they don't know what to do. And so you can lose some really good people by not providing the ability and the tools and the skills how to interact and how to engage under those circumstances. And I think you're right. A lot of people are coming to the workplace not having learned this at home, not having learned it in school. And some of it is some of the isolation that's going on right now just due to technology. You can get on your device and be insular to yourself for a long period of time. You can be on email and not have to talk to anyone directly. So you don't get to practice the skills as often as, let's say, the older generation might have had to do that.
Absolutely. And it's truly devastating because you've got an entire generation coming up where we don't have communication skills. I mean, my first job coming into the corporate world required me to make calls on the phone. And I was terrified because that wasn't a norm in the world that I was growing up in. I could text people. I didn't really use email, but I could instant message people. And like, at least email is pretty close to instant messaging, right? But like calling people, that was weird. Like calls people. But it's so needed in the business world. Like you can't get around that. You need to be able to call people. And a whole generation doesn't have that skill.
You know, it's so funny that you're speaking about this because I was talking to a colleague recently and I was saying, you know, my colleague was saying, well, you know, I don't understand all this new stuff. Why do people need to be on social media? And why do they need to be on Facebook and this, that, and the other? I said, well, you know, for our generation as baby boomers, it's just like how we used to love to talk on the phone. I mean, the phone was the big deal. That's how you connected with people, was to get on the phone, and your parents would say, get off the phone, you've been on the phone too long. And now today, that phone is social media or some of the other platforms. And I think that as we're sort of, you know, correctly identifying, there's a place for that, there's value for it. However, you also still have to retain that skill and ability to talk on the phone and in person too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's another thing, right? There's so many people in my generation and the next generation who don't know how to have a face-to-face conversation. And I'll admit, I was one of those people. I had difficulties having face-to-face conversations with people because I hadn't taught myself how to do that. In the text conversation, you're texting people, and if something doesn't come up, you can wait to respond for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, next day, right? Or you can just like, they ask a question and you don't feel like answering it right now, so you just wait till tomorrow to answer it. Oh, I didn't see the text, right? Face to face, you don't get that. It's like, hey, we're here right now. I just ask you a question, or you just ask me a question. Are you going to say something? Or are you just going to sit there with a look in your face like you don't know what's going on? Like, oh, like you can't do that in face-to-face conversation. You have to be able to have a conversation with people to be successful.
Right. You've got to be able to go back and forth and have that volley, so to speak, of the conversation moving and the baton passing back and forth. You know, I think that sometimes workplaces forget this. And they focus on providing the training and skill for, let's say, the bricklaying, the actual work of the worker, but they don't think about these communication pieces or, you know, kind of like the glue that holds the relationships together at work. And that's generally what's causing people to fall off the wagon. You can have some very, very skilled people as far as your technical part of your job. However, what makes the job work or not work are those softer skills, how you're interacting and get along with others. And frequently, good people are driven out of organizations because they're supervisors and they're managers in positions that don't know how to talk to them. So let's say if I'm highly motivated, and you mentioned earlier about people coming to the workplace, I find that most workers, lots of workers, are highly motivated, but what they find when they get to work are conditions that are demotivating. So if the boss always comes in and he's always talking about what's wrong with this picture and always talking about the mistakes that you're making, never seeing the progress, never commenting on what's going well, what you've improved, and thanking you or appreciating you for the movement or success, that's what really kind of like causes people to shut down. They don't bring their best anymore because they don't feel as though what little they're bringing that is their best, that's not even being seen. So why do more of that?
Exactly. And on top of that, they know that they do have value. And if they know it's not being seen there, they're going to start looking for somewhere where it will be seen. And that's something you were saying is the average lifespan of a employee. It's basically under 2 years for employees now. You have someone only within an organization for 2 years. How do you maintain a stable organization where you have people coming in and out every 2 years if you're lucky?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because when we talk about the culture, if there's that much movement and that much volatility, you want to ask the question, why are people leaving and what is it that they're going to? And sometimes it's not a bad answer, and sometimes it is something you need to look at. They may be leaving because they didn't feel valued, and that happens quite frequently. People not feeling valued at work. What I try to encourage my clients to create, though, is a culture where you really are developing every person to the highest level that they can be developed, not just for the job they're doing today, and not just for work, but even as a person. How am I growing as a person and developing because I'm in your workplace and I'm addressing the challenges of that workplace? When you create that kind of an environment that's dynamic and that's moving forward and that's growing in that sense, and people are learning from each other and it's exciting every day, people get up and they're motivated to come to work, and they don't know what fun thing is really going to emerge that day. In that context, you can also have some movement because you're really preparing people to take on higher level responsibilities. They may take on those responsibilities in your organization, or they may even move somewhere else and use those newfound skills in another company. Here's the thing, though, that's different. If your organization is one of those positive cultures that we're talking about, there will be 3 or 4 other people clamoring to get into your company for that position that was vacated because you are now known as a best place to work, and you're creating the kind of an environment that people want to be a part of. And companies that are like this, they don't even fear the fact that they're losing good people, so to speak, because they don't see it as a loss. They're investing in the work world and sending out other workers to other companies or even other parts of a larger corporation to continue to be successful. So you have to have that sort of mindset, which is more of an abundance mindset than a scarcity mindset. Is, oh, we've got to hold on to our little people and not let them go anywhere, because the more you hold on, the more they want to fly the coop, so to speak.
Absolutely. And you see that all over the place. People are just terrified of everything they're going to lose. If I do this wrong, I'm going to lose this. If I do this with this person, I'm going to lose them because they're going to be too valuable for us. And you try to hold people in. And people are not sharks, right? With a shark, if you put it in a small tank, it'll stay small, right? But people are not sharks. We will outgrow the tank with or without your permission. And if your tank continues to stay small, we'll go find a new tank somewhere else.
Exactly. And then there's some people, so some people know that they really have a greater, grander purpose. And so they can see that this swimming pool is too small for them and they're going to leave. Okay. Then you have other people, they may not even know that yet. However, because you have made the tank so small, they actually get compressed and they don't grow to the level that they could grow to. So when you're creating a success culture, you're really wanting to imagine that the people are like plants, and your job is to put the right nutrients in the soil so that each plant has what it needs and each flower is growing to the fullest extent of its beauty. And so, I love to wear flowers, and so flowers are a big thing for me. But if those flowers don't have the right environment, they don't have water, they don't have soil, they're not going to grow and they're going to die. So sometimes organizations are also responsible for choking out the growth that people want to actually bring.
That was such an interesting phrase. Say it one more time for me just to make sure I understood it right at the end.
Oh, I can never say the same thing twice, but I'll say this. I'll say that, organizations often choke the life out of the plants that they have. You have to remember this. As an organization and as an organization leader, you are a steward. You are a steward of the growth of those plants that you have there, and you can kill them by not providing the right environment or the right resources. And that would be a shame.
Yeah, it would be a terrible shame because so many people have so much potential within them. And for you to be the cause of them not reaching that potential, that can be terrible. That can leave behind a really bad legacy, to be completely honest.
In fact, I'm glad you mentioned that because one of the things that I do as a consultant, one of the biggest things that I do with the executive leaders that I work with, it's my job to kind of look at them and to call out the gifts and the talents that I see in them that sometimes they don't see in themselves. And especially if, maybe there have been some challenges or some difficulties that they've been going through. Maybe there's some business issues that have been really hard to navigate. And to be able to speak that back to them and to work with them to identify how can you use those gifts, how can you use those talents to move this organization to the next place where you really want to have it to go. And sometimes because of just getting beat down, let's say you're that plant out there and in Colorado, we've got a lot of hailstorms.
Yeah.
And let's say golf ball-sized hail is pounding down on you. It can feel like you're not going to live another day. And sometimes you need someone there to say, here's how you get out of this. Here's how you get to the next step. Here's how you preserve yourself even in the midst of the hailstorm. So you got to have partners who come alongside you to do that.
Absolutely. And it goes back to that interdependence, right? If you don't have those people there, you're missing something. And as a leader, you need your team there. And it may be, it's likely that you're going to need some other assistance too, whether it's a consultant or a coach, or there's a plethora of other things that are out there that are really beneficial. Therapists, counselors, all the teachers, all of these people play a special role that can help protect you from the hailstorm that's out there.
Well, I think that one of the reasons that you build in the learning culture is because some of those teachers are right there in your workplace, and they don't have to be at a higher level than you. And that's a really important thing to remember, is that we can all learn something every day from each other. So if you've got it set up so that instead of having the silos, you're bringing the people together for these conversations, and the learning is taking place and people are growing, that's dynamic. And when the organization is dynamic like that and the energy is being infused, those people are thinking about, what's the next hill we want to climb? What else can we collectively do together that's going to benefit our target market or our client? What value can we bring that other people are not even thinking about?
Absolutely. And one of the things I think is really interesting within that is recognizing that people on your team who are not at a higher position than you still have the opportunity to help you see things you couldn't see before. So often leaders think that I have to be the one that knows everything. I'm the one in charge. It's up to me and no one else. And the thing is, you have people on your team who can help you, who have talents that you don't have, who have understandings and perspectives that are different from yours, which can reach more people, which can impact differently. All these things. And when you don't look at your team and see them as individuals that are worthy of contributing, you're missing out on a huge asset that you have.
Absolutely. And a total missed opportunity. There's no reason really to have an organization if you're not going to use all of those collective talents and skills of everyone in that organization. You might as well be working alone. And it's okay to work alone. However, that organization can actually do more because you've got more tentacles out there. You've got more people in more places, and you can identify more places to be. So, I'll just give sort of like an odd example. I don't even know if anything like this exists, but just imagine that you owned, let's say, a major real estate company or organization, and you were located in a place where a lot of Hollywood stars like to live. One of the things you could say collectively as a group, you could begin thinking about what is some value that we could offer to our sort of high-end clients as we're selling homes that maybe the other agencies are not offering. So, for example, it could be that once people buy their beautiful homes in Beverly Hills or wherever it is, they also now are going to need groundskeepers. They're going to need housekeepers. They might need someone to be a nanny and watch the children. And because, let's say I'm a Hollywood star, a high-profile person, everybody is not going to fit the bill for someone that I'm going to hire to do that. Yet if your agency was vetting groups of people who knew how to work in those contexts, in those environments, and who already had successful clients, you're adding an extra layer of value that your clients want and are willing to pay for, saves them time, saves them trouble, saves them energy. And likewise, even though that's one little small example here, just made up right now, organizations have opportunities like that too. What do our clients need from us that our competitors may not be offering? And it's through that collective co-creation that you really come up with those out-of-the-box ideas that make a difference.
Absolutely. I'm 100% on board with you. And something else that I think is really important to elite leadership that you've kind of highlighted on is that sometimes the answers you're looking for have nothing to do with your industry, right? You're talking about real estate. So most people are thinking, okay, if we want to be more successful, we got to sell more houses. But that may not be the answer. And most of the time, the people who have the most success and the people who push the innovation within industries to a further extent get ideas that have nothing to do with their industry. Someone that highlighted this to me was Steven Kotler in his book, Rise of Superman. In the book, he talks a lot about action heroes, not action heroes, but like sports stars, basically. People who are in high level action sports and high risk action sports too. And one of the ones he highlighted on was within the world of surfing. There was this period where people could only surf a certain level of wave. After it got above that, the wave was called a maverick. And no one surfed the mavericks because if you got caught in the wave and you didn't surf it out all the way, you would get caught in the current and you would die because no one had figured out how to hold their breath for longer than 3 minutes in the surfing world. The first person who figured out how to ride a maverick got the answer not from the surfing world, but from the world of deep diving. So there are people who drop just down super deep into the water and they hold their breath for ungodly amounts of minutes. And he got the answer for how to surf a maverick from completely outside of his industry.
You know, and it's interesting because it's a related area because it's in the water, okay? So sometimes it may not be so far away. You just have to look. And I would say, I really think that it's important to consider clients as partners too. You've got to look at them and listen to the clients to see what do they want? What is it that would make a difference to them in, let's say, that house buying experience that they're not already getting elsewhere, not already experiencing elsewhere, but that they would find valuable. And a lot of times we're just putting things out there that we think that client ought to have rather than thinking about what do they really want and what do they really need and what would make a difference for them. So that communication piece, again, is important. Not only are you listening internally to what you generate, but you're also listening externally to those client stakeholders or potential client stakeholders who may want to purchase your services.
Absolutely. And there's a huge missed opportunity that I see with a lot of people in the entrepreneur world. It's something that I've worked with a few clients on. It's that when you don't get a yes from a potential client, why didn't you get the yes? Right? Because they have the answer. They know why they didn't pick you for the service. And you can understand why that was. And that can allow you to recreate what you need to recreate so that in the future, people want to pick you.
Yeah, so we're talking a little bit now about another aspect of mindset. So part of that mindset is to say, if it's coming from a learning frame, if there's a no, there's a reason for the no, and I want to have enough curiosity to pursue that and discover the reason, because whatever I'm going to learn, I'll be able to leverage that and use it moving forward. Now, frequently, people, instead of thinking about it that way, will say, oh, well, that was a rejection of me. They didn't like me. I feel bad. And now instead of seeking out, I'm closing down or closing in and no longer available for the learning.
Absolutely. And something within that I think is really important, and it's a missing aspect within the world today that so many leaders are missing, is the curiosity factor. Being curious, it's such a valuable tool to be curious, to ask questions, to wonder what if, that we're missing all over the place.
Absolutely. In fact, in today's world, I think curiosity is even more important than it's ever been before, because we're living in a world that's very diverse, it's very global, it's very cross-cultural. And if you are going to be successful, it's important to be curious about other people who may look differently than you do, who think differently, who may come from very different backgrounds, and be willing and able to appreciate the difference that they're bringing so that that can be leveraged again for the collective success. And so people who are not curious very often are not comfortable in settings where there are those differences, and they actually run away from that rather than embrace it.
Absolutely. And it becomes detrimental to you as a leader if you always seek just the exact same thing and you run away from anything that's different. It completely puts a lid on the capacity of what you're able to accomplish, because those things that are different than you are probably what you need in order to reach the next level of success. So if you're not open to understanding something outside of what you already know, you're highly limiting what is possible for yourself.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And you have to be willing to sometimes to experiment and maybe not be perfect at doing something. So I remember when I was living, for example, in Germany and I was working there, I went downtown one day to the shoe repair shop, and I had been learning German in my German class. And it's a very difficult language, at least for me. I'm more of a Romance language person, like French or something like that. And so I go down there and I have my German dictionary with me. I sort of practice what I'm going to say. I have my shoes that need to be repaired. And I walk up to the counter and I say, to the shoe repairman in German, that I have these shoes and I like to get heels put on them. And he answers back and I'm understanding and everything's going great. And then I ask him, because it's one of those stores where you can come back and get the shoes in the same day. And so I said, well, how long is it going to take, or when should I come back? And so I just learned how to tell time. So I figured he's going to tell me what time to show up, and I would understand that. And he said something that I didn't learn in class yet. I had no idea what he was talking about. And for those who speak German, he said, Halbstunde. And I'm like, what is Halbstunde? I have no idea that. And so I asked in multiple other ways, trying to get a number from him. And he got very irritated and very angry. And he said, Halbstunde, and just was about to walk away. So someone else in the line who spoke both English and German said to me, well, Halbstunde means half an hour. I didn't know that Halbstunde meant half an hour. And so what I'm saying, some people would have an experience like that, and then they would go home, they would stay in the house, they wouldn't come out, they wouldn't engage, they wouldn't continue to learn German or practice. And in my case, I said, oh, great, I learned a new phrase today, Halbstunde, and I'd be fine. And then when I went back to German class, I asked my teacher, well, how come he got so angry because I was questioning this? And she said, because in their culture, he thought that I was trying to pin him down to an exact number of minutes. And he wasn't understanding. I just didn't understand the term Halbstunde. So that's a cultural thing, to be able to understand differences from how other people think. And again, it wasn't about me necessarily, although his tone of voice was very harsh. And I could have gone away and felt really bad about it. So I'd say sometimes we're in scenarios, we have to get out of the comfort zone. We have to continue to engage and continue to have experiences.
Absolutely. And within that too is what is the expectation you have, right? And understanding expectations of different types of people, right? For you, your expectation going into the conversation was getting an exact time. His expectation was, I'll give you a roundabout answer to it, right? About half an hour, more or less. And it's different expectations. And when you guys can't figure out how to get a middle ground due to communication errors, which happens not just between languages, but it happens between people on the same team all the time speaking the same language. If you can't get the expectations to be understood between each other, you both end up in a place where you feel like you've been wronged.
I actually would say in this situation, I would say it's not so much different expectations as misunderstanding. Because what I was really trying to get was not an exact number of minutes per se. I was just trying to understand when to come back in something that I could understand where I knew what it was. If he had said come back at 3:00, since I had learned that in class, I'd understand what 3:00 meant. But when he said half an hour, I hadn't learned that term yet. And he took it to mean that I was insisting on exact minutes when in fact, I just wanted to know when to come back. And I just needed to hear it in some words that I knew already. Or because I was creative, I found other ways to ask the question, but it just made it worse because he thought I was asking for exact minutes when in fact I wasn't. And so how often that even happens in the workplace? It's not even that we want something different. We both wanted the same thing. He wanted me to come back at the right time. I wanted to know the right time to come back. However, the language we were using to communicate that caused a misunderstanding.
Absolutely. And language is such an interesting topic because so often people say something and they think they've been understood. And when they come back later, what they were expecting isn't what happened. And it's like, wait, but I said this. And sometimes they did actually say that. It's just the understanding wasn't transmitted. And sometimes they didn't actually say what they thought they said. They're saying,
absolutely,
like they said this, and you're like, well, you said this, and that's what I thought it was. It's like, no, that's not what I meant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're definitely highlighting the two-way nature of communication. We put something out there, that's the transmitting part, and then there's the receiving end. And something can be lost in translation. The receiver, also the message has got to go through the receiver. And what happens when it comes out the back end of the receiver may be different.
Exactly. And it can cause all sorts of different challenges around that, right?
Exactly. And that's when it's so important to be willing, at least, to have a conversation to unpack those misunderstandings. Let's say someone's angry with you and they've walked away, to be able to walk back and say, maybe something's happened here that was unintended, because I see that you've walked away and I see that you're not speaking to me anymore. So I'm wondering what you heard or what you thought I said. And to be able to come back to it. And so often we leave it on that sour note, not knowing that there really was a misunderstanding.
Absolutely. Which is within that, what I want to ask you is, how do you get past that? Right? How do you make it so that you can get to the same level of understanding, whether it's just on your team or whether it's cross-culturally?
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, first let's start with what I'll call some of the mindset things first. The mindset part is coming to the conversation with the notion that most people, and there are exceptions to this, most people are well-intended. So you're giving the person the benefit of the doubt on the front end that they're probably wanting to do something that's helpful or wanting to do something that's valuable. Secondly, you're bringing the mindset that says, even though this person may be different from me, I'm willing to respect them and I'm willing to be respected by them. So just because they're saying it differently than how you would or doing something in a different way doesn't make them wrong, doesn't make them less than, doesn't make them inferior. So there are some of those mindset pieces that are really important. Then secondly, let's say, like even in the case in the store, the couple things I tried was to say it in a different way. Use some different words. If the first words aren't working, try another set of words. Go at it again, maybe in a different context. Now, of course, in this case, my language skills in that language were limited, and this person didn't speak English either. And so it was useful in that context to have a translator. And in our workplaces, we do have people who can listen to both people and really understand, you know, you both are wanting the same thing. Here's what I hear, and here's another way to get there, or here's another word that means the same thing to help you understand maybe what you didn't understand in the first case. So we also have to be willing to ask for help. We have to be willing to get other people to weigh in and sometimes translate what we don't understand.
Absolutely. And there's so much power in that, right? One, being open to trying to explain it in different ways, not being so set on one thing being the only way, but being able to say, hey, you know, what was communicated wasn't understood the way I intended it to. So let me try a different approach to see if I can help you see it the way I see it.
Yeah, this is really significant because I don't know if you've worked in many contexts. Let's say if you're in the United States and people are visiting from other countries and speak different languages, and maybe they don't speak English very well. So you say something to them in English and they don't get it. And then some people just say the same thing louder and louder and louder. It doesn't matter how loud you say the same thing. The person doesn't understand. They're not going to get it. And so being flexible, that agility that we have in the workplace in terms of how we engage people and what we say, and being able to go at it from a different angle, that's critical.
Absolutely. I love the visual of someone just getting louder and louder and louder. And it's like, it's not that they couldn't hear you, right? They heard the words, they are just not understanding the words. And there's a difference between hearing and understanding, because you can hear a language. I hear a lot of different languages, but that doesn't mean I understand most of them.
Exactly.
So within that, I'd love to hear some of the stories behind the different cross-cultural settings you've been a part of, because you've been through, I mean, you've been all over the place. I'd love to hear some of the leadership lessons you've learned through those cross-culture settings.
Well, you know, let me first just share maybe some things that I've appreciated about people, or what I appreciate. Right now, for example, I have some clients in Canada, so I go back and forth to Canada several times a year doing work there. One of the things I appreciate about the Canadians, and I'm working mostly in the Toronto area, Canada is extremely diverse. I'm talking about people from all over the world, all different backgrounds, all different food groups, all different languages, and they have a very high commitment to diversity and to leveraging the benefit of it. We think in the United States that we do a really great job of that, but I think the Canadians actually have, something to teach us about it. So I've really just enjoyed watching that joy, I guess, that's present in Canada about really embracing difference. So that's one of the things I noticed there. I know that when I was traveling to Ghana in West Africa, and that's kind of considered as a third world country, but maybe one of the better off third world kind of countries, the entrepreneurial business owners there were very innovative in a fast way. So let's say if you were down on the beach and somebody was coming by and they were trying to sell you a little caftan, a beach, cover up or whatever, because they saw you didn't have one with you or whatever. If you said you didn't like that color, or maybe the length wasn't right, or you wanted a little hair wrap to go with yours, no problem. They would go away in that moment and they would tell you when they were coming back, they would bring you what you wanted. It would be the caftan in the color you wanted. It would be the right length, and it would have the hair wrap to go with it. And they did it fast and came back. That's customer service. That's the entrepreneurial spirit at work. And here are people who are working with very limited resources, but they know there's a target market there who has the ability to purchase these items, and they want to make sure that they get their share of that target market by providing just-in-time service and to your specifications. What I also really appreciated about the Ghanaians, they're very spiritually minded people. And so many of them, for example, are strong practicing Christians. And some of their businesses actually had biblical names. And then they infused how they dealt with people with those values and those practices as well. So that was really, just powerful to see in operation. So the country is, they have a word that's akwaba, which means welcome. And that's how the people in Ghana are. You feel welcome. It's like a welcome light. And it's very, very warm and very engaging. So that's what I appreciated a lot there. And I would say I've traveled to the Middle East as well. And traveling to the Middle East is interesting because traveling there as a person who's a Christian and not a Muslim, very different rules apply. There's some things you can't carry without endangering your life, while you're there. And yet I found that the people were warm and friendly and engaging if you were willing to engage them and to also understand that there are some different cultural practices and to be willing to do as the Romans in Rome, kind of, is what I would say. So you have to have an open-mindedness is what I would add to it.
Absolutely. And that is so key, because so often within leadership, and I'm touching just on the last point at this point. That's a funny phrase. Anyways, so with that, meeting them where they are. So often we tell people, I want you to be where I am, right? This is how I practice. You need to be like me. But there's so much more power when you as the leaders take a step back and say, I'm going to see it from your perspective right now. I'm going to do as you do so that I can understand what it is that you do. And it creates a connection, because most people aren't willing to move where they are. They stand like bricks, and it's like a overcast shadow that they lay around them, and no one wants to be in that shadow.
Well, you know what it is, it's not even sometimes that they don't want to move, they may not know how. So imagine, okay, you're the leader and you're standing on one side of a vast body of water, and your people are all on the other side of the water, and you tell them, oh yeah, come on over here, it's really great on this side, and they're looking and they're saying, how are we going to get over there? So sometimes as the leader, you have to go to where they are and create the bridge to get to where you are. And expecting them to do it is not always reasonable. Sometimes the leader ends the leader, since you've already crossed that body of water, you've got some experiences that are valuable. You may have some resources that are helpful, and you can show your people how to get there, and you're going with them. That's the whole essence of leadership, is that you're doing it together rather than expecting them to act as though they don't have a leader.
Exactly. And so often people in leadership positions are just expecting people to just go. I say, do this, you go. And that's not how it works in reality usually. People don't want to just be told. They want someone to show them the ropes. They want someone who can show that they can actually do it themselves, and they're not just telling you to do it because they don't know. They're asking you to do it because they know that you can do it, and there are other things that also need to get done.
And I would say, especially, that I was in the Army as an Army officer, and of course in a military setting, you want to know that your leaders know what they're talking about in terms of where they're leading you, because these are life and death decisions, and you don't want to be led in a place where you're going to get killed unnecessarily because someone didn't think through all the components and it was poor leadership. So there is that, where the leader has some respect, and they also have credibility because they have walked that walk before. They've walked that pathway. They've walked that mile. They know what's on the top of the hill. And so therefore they can show you how to get on the top of the hill. There's certainly that component. In addition, I think in today's workplace, people don't even always just want the leader to be the one saying, here's what we're going to do, or specifying it. They want to be a part of creating that direction and creating how we're going to do it to really be full partners and team members. And that's often the opportunity that's left on the table in a lot of workplaces. You hire talented, gifted people and then don't include them in that planning. You figure, okay, I'm just going to go over here in the closet, figure all this out myself, and then come out and roll out the next steps to them. People tend to support better what they also help to co-create.
Absolutely. And so many people have the ability to create things, and they know they have the ability to create things. And when they're not out in the world creating anything, they feel like their value is not being seen, it's not being understood. And no one likes to feel like that. And it leaves them sometimes in depression, or it leaves them angry. It leaves them not wanting to be with you, though, which is the worst part of the leadership, right? If your leader doesn't have, if you as the leader don't have people who want to be led by you, that's a problem.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, this really sort of gets into maybe a little bit of some thoughts about just legacy and legacy creation, because I think that if I think about Stephen Covey when he said, begin with the end in mind. I work a lot with senior leaders, so some of them, they are thinking about legacy, because I'll tell you, becoming a senior person age-wise sneaks up on you. And then next thing you know, you wake up and you realize, oh, I'm in that group. I can remember in my career when most of my clients were older than me, and now there are very few clients that are actually older than me because I'm actually in the older group. And so that legacy piece, you need to think about it really from day one and from the beginning, and be thinking about, that sort of Girl Scout and Boy Scout principle that says, I'm going to leave the place better than I found it. And so what does that look like? When you end up choosing to retire, or perhaps to work in a different way into your retirement years, and you're passing the baton onto some other leaders that you've been preparing and getting ready for the future, it's like, what do you want to characterize your leadership? What are you leaving behind in terms of practices, in terms of ways of operating that allows that business to be sustainable for what you call that infinite time period or into the future? So each person can leave their brand, leave their mark, if they will, on the organization. And there are three things they need to ask. They first have to ask, what do they want personally? And a lot of people skip this question. But I'll tell you, if you don't have skin in the game for yourself, you're not going to be motivated to do the next couple things. So you have to ask, what do you want personally in terms of the legacy issue? What do you want for the organization? And what do you want for the people? Because legacy is also about, like as we've been talking about, building and growing them and preparing them for a greater future and for more choices and for more opportunity. So I think that's huge. Leaders need to be thinking about that as well.
Absolutely. And oh my goodness. So within that, go through those three things again, because I think they're so important.
Well, first you ask, what is it that you want personally in the legacy? How do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be seen? What do you want your legacy to be characterized as? I was the leader who inspired people to do more than they thought they could possibly do, or whatever it is. I'm the one who provided resources that people thought they couldn't get, but somehow we made it happen. We're the ones on my watch. We created something that clients really wanted that no one else had created before. So what is it that you want personally out of it is one question. Number two, what do you want for the organization? So maybe up to this point, your organization has made one cathedral. Do you want to be known worldwide for making cathedrals? Do you want to make them in the third world and do them in culturally relevant ways? I don't know what that distinctive is for you, but be thinking about, what do you want for the organization? And then what do you want for your people? Ideally, you want them not necessarily earmarked for a particular job like it used to be back in the olden days, kind of like when I was coming along, but you want them prepared so that there are multiple jobs they could potentially walk into, multiple directions, either in your organization or outside of your organization, and perhaps even the ability to create something that doesn't exist because they have talent in an area that you hadn't thought about, but that you really could use.
Absolutely. So within each of those, there's so much importance. One of the things that I think of a lot is so many people don't think about themselves when they create goals, when they're creating a legacy. They don't think about why they themselves want it. And not just in business, but in regular life too. For instance, a lot of people who have cigarette addictions or alcohol addictions say, I'm going to quit it for my kids. And the whole reasoning isn't because they want to stop it, but because they want the kids. They think the kids want that. And what usually happens is they're not able to kick that addiction because it's not for them. But you can very easily twist that idea, that concept, because you can go from I do it for them to I'm not doing it just for them, but I'm doing it because I want to be the person they look up to. I want them to see me as what a overcomer looks like. And now it's transitioned from them to you. Why is it important to you? It's because you want to be that role model to them. And you can translate that. Exactly.
And that example still involves the children a lot. What if you were to say, you know what, I want to stop my alcohol addiction because I'll be able to contribute at a higher level in the workplace or to the world. I'd be able to leverage my gifts in the most possible way. I'd be able to live the purpose for which I've been designed. You know, there's some way that you've got to be able to say, even if my children all become addicts or whatever, I'm still going to do it for me. You know, that's the thing. Because sometimes if it's just for me being that role model and they aren't listening or watching right now, I can get discouraged, you know. But there's a reason why I will be better off if I stop smoking. A reason I'll be better off if I'm not addicted to something or whatever. So we also have to look at what's in it for me. And even if so-and-so never looks at me as a role model, even if they never change their path, I stay firmly doing what I think is right and best because I'm doing it for a reason that supersedes them.
Absolutely. I'm 100% on board with you there. And then it goes from just being about yourself to what can the business accomplish, right? Because a business, what makes a business work, a team work, a group of people work, is not just doing work, but where is it going to, right? Because we can all go to some place to work, but that doesn't mean we actually accomplish anything while being there. I watched a great YouTube video on The Office, the TV show. And what they talked about was how within the structure of The Office, basically it's something that we're seeing very prevalent in the world, where there are these organizations that come up that don't have a real purpose. They're not going anywhere. And they just have jobs to fill. And within those jobs that are being filled, you have people who are kind of just dorking around because it's a job and they need to look busy and they need to put up things to make them sound like they're actually getting things done. And they try and give themselves goals within the small little thing that doesn't actually have any real purpose, but so to maintain that organization from falling apart. But in the long term, those organizations die. They can't sustain themselves because the organization isn't designed to get somewhere. So that organization, to live at the highest levels, needs to have a goal to get somewhere.
Well, yeah, that's a really important point, because you're asking people to sign up for something and to bring their talents to it. And people want to be proud of their organization. They want to believe that their organization is doing something that's important. And in fact, I really like working with organizations that I refer to as values-based organizations. And what I mean by that, They know that there is something that they are here to do. Maybe they're finding the cure for cancer. Maybe they are creating a medical device that's going to make someone's life easier in the long run. Maybe they are creating beautiful chairs that people can put in their homes and be proud of and, pass down as legacy items to their children. I don't know, whatever it is, there's some sense that we're making a contribution, and it's a contribution that's desired and wanted, that's needed, and it will make a difference in somebody's life. Not just that I'm here and my only objective is to make money. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying that an organization shouldn't be profitable. I want all of my clients to be more profitable because of the work that we're doing. However, the profit is actually the byproduct of doing the right things. So you don't say, okay, we're going for profit, and then you don't focus on anything else. You're probably not going to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And within that, right, you need to have a reason that combines what you want with where the organization wants to get to. And that, I think, highlighted it really well, because if you want something but it has no place within where the organization is going towards, it's really hard to want to contribute at the highest levels to that.
Well, yeah, you're talking now about having a good fit between the person and the organization, their goals and their values having to mesh and match some kind of way. And there are times that people need to make decisions to go to a different organization because there's not a values fit, or because what the individual wants is in conflict with what the organization is about. And so you do the organization a favor by shifting, because you can't do what they want to do if your heart's really not in it, or that's not what you want. Or if really you're supposed to be somewhere else, then that somewhere else is missing you while you are that square peg in the round hole over there,
Absolutely. Definitely. And this ties really well into the third piece you mentioned, which is the team and what do they want to be accomplishing, the people on your team. Are their values, are their goals aligned with where the corporation wants to go? Because it's going to be really hard to get the corporation, the business, to go where you want it to go if you have a bunch of square pegs in round holes.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And I think the biggest thing that organizations really have to combine is what I would call two sides of a coin. Mm-hmm. That is being best places to work, and then also having competitive advantage in the marketplace. And that does mean having the right people, as we said, if you're creating the success culture, recruiting the right people in the right jobs. What I often find with some of the organizations that I'm working with that are growing and that are scaling is that they have outgrown their current structures. And so what they really need is they need to build in new structures, new scaffolding, if you will, because they're building a bigger house and they're putting it on the same old foundation. So in some of the companies, they need to add positions. They need to add jobs that they've never had before. They need to bring in additional people. And they sometimes have to do that at a rapid pace, because if they're growing at a rapid pace, they need those people like yesterday. And so being a best place to work means I am recognizing that I cannot continue to overwork my few people and have each one of them do the work of 2 or 3 or 4 jobs, and therefore get burned out and never get anything done quite at the level where they need to. So I'm not resourcing them properly, for success, if you will. And then they're also not able to deliver to the customer. Because here's what I find. Generally speaking, the people in the workplace are going to treat the customer very similar to how they're treated in-house, because they're actually an internal customer and they just pass it right down. So if you even think about airlines, there are some airlines that treat their employees very well. Their employees are happy. They treat the customers well. There are other airlines whose employees feel very disenfranchised. And I've been standing in lines in airports many times when I see that customer service person behind the desk just, won't budge. use language that's inflammatory, that gets the person riled up unnecessarily, as opposed to, thinking about how can I help you? And that attitude is because that's how they're treated in-house. The organization's not saying to them, how can I help you grow? How can I help you learn? It's, you're just a cog in the wheel and you can be replaced. So if you treat people like that, they treat others like that. You don't have that infinite organization that's sustainable for the future. You're not at best place to work. So right now, when people are finding jobs a little more easily, you're going to lose your people to your competitors who have a best place to work. And they're going to leverage those people to then create the competitive advantage that you're offering out there to the market.
Absolutely. 100% on board with you. Now, Dr. Karen, we're running close to our time here. If you had to leave just one piece of something with people about elite leadership, what would be that one piece you would want to leave with them?
I'd like to leave that your people are your greatest asset in the organization. They are worth the investment that you have a choice and opportunity to make in them. And therefore, invest in your people so that they, in turn, can invest in you and the business and the customers.
Wonderful. I love it. Dr. Karen, if anyone is trying to get a hold of you, what are the best ways for them to do that for you?
I would say definitely visit my website, which is transleadership.com. And when they get there, sign up for our newsletter, which is the Success newsletter. And when they sign up for that, here's what they're going to get, because I'm going to be starting actually to summarize our podcast in a Cliff Notes version every month. And so therefore they can sign up for that newsletter. And listen to the podcast. The Voice of Leadership comes out twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Get on Roku and Amazon Fire. Look for Dr. Karen Speaks Leadership on Raven International Network, and you'll hear me there as well. See me on TV. And my book here. Go to Amazon and get Lead Yourself First.
Definitely.
And the thing you'll get out of this is you'll get a picture or understanding of my own leadership journey, what I've done to lead myself first, how I leverage those lessons for my clients, and we'll ask some thought questions for you so that you can also figure out how to leverage your life experience so that you can have more success both in life and at work. So that's also an option as well.
Don't let it fall.
Oh, it's still here.
Oh my goodness.
And guess what? It's got resilience and agility, so even if it falls, it can bounce back.
Boom. Just like leaders need to be able to, right?
Exactly.
So I also understand that you've got a gift for the audience. Is that right?
Yes, I do. I do have a VIP bonus, which is actually, it's a chapter in my book. And in addition to that chapter, a couple of pieces of bonus content, which would be 2 models that we use to show the success culture model that I've been talking about here. But one of the graphs also talks about what happens if you have only 2 of the 3. And it goes around and shows that whole picture. So people would be able to take a look at that and evaluate their own culture, where they are and where some tweaks might need to be made.
That's awesome. And thank you for doing that. I really appreciate that, Dr. Karen. Is there anything else that you want to leave with us today?
The only other thing I would say is this, and this is a concept that actually, 2 concepts that actually come from my books. I'll mention these 2 things. You have your own race to run, and the race that you're running is not the same as anyone else's. So you will have to figure out your own unique way to run it so you win it. And so I'm going to say, number 1, run your own race. And that's huge. And it goes back to me in the military. We used to have to run all the time and pass the physical training and PT test. And I found that the way to run the race to win for me was not the same as how most military people run the race. So I had to ignore them and do it the way that worked for me. And each of us has to do that. So run your own race. Number 2, I would say, remember, You yourself are the instrument of your own leadership. And therefore, tune up that instrument. Get it ready so that you can play the music that you were designed to play.
That is beautiful. I like that. And your music is needed in the world because there's an orchestra, and every instrument in the orchestra is extremely important to make the song sound really good. And so you have to make sure you're playing that music, right?
Yes, and I'll add one other piece on that, which is this. Since my husband and I are really kind of jazz aficionados, one of the things that's great about playing jazz is that you really have to be agile in the moment and be able to riff with the other players and switch it up. And when they're going down this trail, you've got to know what to do with your instrument to join in with them. So you can't rely always on just the sheet music. Know your stuff.
Absolutely. I love that. Free flow jazz is some of the most interesting, complex, and it's so amazing that people can do that. And the other awesome thing is that you don't have to play music to be able to utilize that concept within your life. You can utilize that no matter where you are in life. You can utilize it in your business. You can utilize it on your team. You can utilize it with your family. The ability to pick up on different people's rhymes and rhythms and how they're switching, and how do I switch with them so that we can continue to function all together perfectly.
Yeah, and I'll just do a brief, quick little plug. If they join us on Dr. Karen Speaks Leadership, the TV show, we have some upcoming episodes where we actually talk about leadership lessons from musicians, how they apply to the business environment. And we also talk about iconic brands, for example, on Fifth Avenue in New York, and what we can learn from them. So I like to get creative with it, and so there are other angles.
That's awesome. I love looking at leadership from different perspectives like that. So I'm definitely going to tune in for that because that's going to be so much fun.